Okay, so we're here to look at the 2019 vintage. I think the first thing of note is those of you who have been down here before, you're probably noticing there's not as much down here right now. 2019 was a relatively light vintage for us. Very tricky growing season. I think it was sort of a return. I've spoken with a lot of my peers about this, sort of a return to a classic Oregon vintage. And I think what we all really mean by that is one where it rained a lot. It's funny though, I mean, we've gotten, I think, very good at sort of ducking the sun, and this was a vintage that sort of reminded us we need to also remember how to sort of weave between the raindrops in a harvest season. So fairly typical growing season, it's just that our summer was abnormally cool. We were mainly in the 70s and low 80s, and low cloud cover also lent a lot of humidity. Those of you who spend time in Oregon know the valley is not typically humid at all. And we had humidity, and what that meant is all through the growing season, we were under tremendous disease pressure. As organic growers, sulfur is your main combatant, and it was a year where we needed to really be on top of our spray program and our cultural practices to mitigate any powdery mildew we were seeing out in the field. But despite the fact that we were sort of ducking through rain events all through harvest, most of the fruit was very intact. It's a nice vintage, I think, to look at, simply because we're looking at alcohols that were naturally moderate. As you can see, color was certainly not an issue. We weren't dealing with any amount of dilution due to the rain. And I think, sort of a return, to form for Bethel Heights in a lot of ways, is these are wines of sort of elegance and purity and delicacy. And the really nice thing about vintages that go a little bit more on the lean side is you have, as the French love to say, vintages of the soil versus vintages of the sun. And I think over the last 8 years, the pieces of our property, as they're sort of delineated in the glass, both aromatically and on the palate, are much clearer to me this vintage than they were in, say, 2018, where the wines are all pretty dense and powerful. 17, again, a vintage with a little bit more delicacy, but I feel, even more transparency at the moment now with the 19s than I did with the 17s at that time. So these barrels are from Justice. This is the block on the far east side of the property. It's one we share with our friends, Ken and Erica, down at Walter Scott. And I think just really good potential from 2019 for those that love sort of classic, more delicate style Pinot. Cheers.